Static grass is it gets everywhere, it's like glitter. Hey folks, right, welcome to a super simple base tutorial where you take this weird plastic little round thing and turn it into a fully fledged base. So this is for absolute beginners. So you want some sand and gravel. This is a mix of chinchilla sand and old GW gravel, and then any bits and pieces that you want to put on top of the base. Now you want something, you've got to make sure that you see how your model's going to fit on it. Obviously you don't want to cover the base completely into big sort of huge lumps and things. So we're just going to go with something really simple here, just a piece of rock. This is an old piece of putty that I had sort of knocking around, which we've just super glued to the base, and that's a sort of ornament, if you like, and then your character can sit either next to it or having one foot on it. You'll want some PVA glue. I tend to use Mod Podge. It dries really hard. You can use it as a varnish on sort of papery things, I believe it's initially designed for. So, but any old PVA glue will do, and you just want to splodge that on. And then what we're going to do afterwards is we're just going to dip that into the gravel and get a nice coat on there. So you don't need to do any preparation on this at all. So this is perfect for beginners. Make sure you get into all the nooks and crannies. Don't go on top of the piece of ornamentation. That's just going to stay as it is. Just wipe away the excess around the edges. Just keep it neat and tidy. Always makes the base look really good. So just chuck it in there. What you want to do is just give it a press down before you tip off the excess. So any thicker parts of glue, just press down the gravel, tap it all off. Again, any excess, because there will be sticky bits around the outside, just wipe it off with your thumb. And there we go, there's a little piece around the outer edge which just needs a bit of extra glue on, so we'll do that in a second. What we'll do as well is we'll add a bit of variation. Just put some blobs of PVA glue, because you don't want the base to be too flat. Just want to add a bit of what they call visual interest. Battlefields are often very bumpy surfaces, but obviously you don't want to go too far, because then your model's not going to be able to sit on the base properly. So just press it down, press it into the sand as well if you want to, and then just wipe off the excess. There's that bit around the edge. Now what we'll do is we'll just pop a bit more PVA glue on there and dip it in the sand again. So although the texture on bases isn't too bad, it's not as good as sand. So I think the main point of this is not to worry if you get things on the edge of the base, especially with PVA glue, because you can just wipe it off. There we go. So what you need to do is just let that sit and dry completely, and then we're going to cover it in thinned PVA glue, because at the moment the sand is stuck on top of the glue. So if you try and dry brush it or paint it, it's going to come off. So adding a really thin layer of PVA glue, or your preferred sort of water-based thick glue over the top, just bonds everything together. So you want it reasonably thin. You don't want to have it too thick, because then it'll cover the detail. as quite a lot of painters will say with their paint, you want the consistency of milk, which for paint makes not a great deal of sense, but for PVA glue it does actually make sense. So consistency of milk, and just dab it on. Don't scrub or brush side to side, because obviously the sand is still just stuck on top of the glue. So if you just get it thin and just dab it on, the sand will stay in place. There we go. Now you will need to leave this to dry for a little while, so if you are batch creating these, that's probably a good idea. So if you have sort of 10 or so, you can start working on ones as they dry. And that's it, completely dry, and that you can put paint on that. As you can see, glue hasn't covered the detail at all. So I'm going to start off with a layer of dryad bark. Now you don't need to prime these. This is why it's a super simple base tutorial, because you don't need to do a lot of preparation with it. The main thing is just letting things dry thoroughly. So just scrub it in, coat the whole thing with dryad bark, and then let that dry. You can use any kind of brown for this one. Sort of a mid brown is quite nice. If you're not using GW and using Army Painter, for example, oak brown is okay. That's quite a reddy brown. More your standard, or what you think of when you think of the colour brown, effectively. But I was trying something just for a slightly darker battlefield base. So I'm going to go over with Steel Legion Drab, and we're going to do what's called dry brushing. You need some kitchen towel, and you need to take off the excess paint. As you get used to it, you'll know how much to take off. Start with a light coat. You can see how the paint comes off onto the base, and as you get used to it, you can start adding more and more paint, but you just don't want a really heavy coat. You don't want to completely cover the paint underneath. So just give that a few coats just to lighten everything up a little bit. Don't need to worry about the ornament because we'll paint that as a kind of stone look. So now for a slightly lighter version, we're just going to mix a Steel Legion Drab with a bit of a Shabty Bone. We don't want to go too bright just yet, because the very brightest highlights will go over the whole base, including the grey of the stone. So for the time being, we're just highlighting just the dirt. One thing to note, this is dry brushing, so if you do find yourself washing the brush, make sure you've got spare dry brushes left over that you can use whilst the brush you've washed is drying, because any kind of moisture on the brush will ruin the dry brush effect. So here we're just blocking in the colour of the stone with Dawnstone. Just any kind of mid-grey will do. Because we're not going to do too much to this. We're going to add a little highlight with Administratum Grey. Don't worry about letting the previous coat dry on this one. You want to kind of mix the two together. I've found when you're creating bases, more random is better. So any kind of little defects and things actually works in your favour. And then just pick out some random stones and pebbles and bits and pieces in Administratum Grey. You won't necessarily completely see these in the finished product, but it just adds a little bit of variation. So pure Ushabti bone with a new clean, well, old clean brush, but a dry brush. And then again, take off the excess paint and run that over the whole thing. The very final highlight is Wraithbone. You could use Screaming Skull for this if you wanted to. Again, take the excess off, but this time we're just hitting the edges of things. If you imagine that there's going to be a miniature in there somewhere at some point, he's creating shadow, so your very finest highlights go on the outside of the base and just around the edges of the rock. Now we give the whole thing a coat of Agrax Earthshade, which just ties everything together, smooths out all the dry brushing. If you find that the layer on top of the stone is too thick, you can just clean your brush and just push the excess off, or just use your thumb. Just wipe it off. It's not a huge issue. Okay, so that's the bulk of it done. So now we want to add a little bit of grass to it. Now I've got two kinds of grass from Javis Scenics. One is slightly too brown and one is very much too green. So you can do the same as you do with paints and you can mix them together. So mixing the two together tones it down slightly. And what you want to do is just add some random dots of PVA glue. How much or how little you put on is entirely up to you. If you want to coat quite a lot of it in grass, absolutely fine. I find patches here and there are okay. Again, take into account where your model's going to be sat. If you want to put your model on first, that's perfectly fine to do. Sprinkle your grass over the top and just press it down with your thumb. And then just tap the excess off. Try not to drop it. And what you want to do is just give it a quick blow and blow off any excess, or once it's dried, get a brush to it and brush off anything that will stick to the bits that don't have PVA glue on it, because static grass is it gets everywhere. It's like glitter. So all we want to do now is just edge the base. Now this is entirely personal preference, so you could use Steel Legion Drab, that looks quite nice. Or just a nice black, because black goes with everything. Get rid of any stray bits of static grass. Like I said, they get everywhere. The black works quite nicely because it makes the rest of the base look lighter than it actually is. And there we have it. One super simple, completely finished, super simple base. So for absolute beginners, hopefully this has helped, and stay tuned for more super simple tutorials, because we're going to go through a lot more stuff and get people up to speed who've never tried the hobby before. So thank you very, very much for watching. Please like and subscribe as per usual, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.